You sound like maybe a little bit of a competitive person.
I always got straight A's in competition, that's for sure.
I'm Hank Green, and here at Study Hall, we are obsessed with learning how people learn and make hard life decisions. Today, I'm talking to WNBA superstar, Olympian, entrepreneur, and all-around awesome person, Sue Bird. Sue and I both have weird schedules, so we had to film this interview remotely, which is why it looks a little different, but we got to discuss her education and how that education played such an important role in her life and career. Welcome, Sue Bird, Olympic gold medalist, athlete, legend, state bird of Washington, I've heard. It's absolutely a joy to have you here. I am honored that you showed up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Also on the list, entrepreneur. You are making a thing. What is Togethxr?
Togethxr is a media and commerce company that myself, Alex Morgan, Simone Manuel, and Chloe Kim founded. And it was really just our way for, women athletes who wanted to change how women's sports was covered, right? Try to make a dent in the fact that only 4% of media coverage at the time was going towards women's sports. So this was our way of kind of making our mark and, like I said, putting a dent in that. And it's working so far, right? I think last reported, I think we're up to like 16%. So that's exciting news. And we do a lot of different things in Togethxr. It's a great brand. We're having a lot of fun with it.
I want to talk about your education journey. So from the very beginning also. Was school like a thing that you thought about, that you enjoyed, or was it like a have to thing, or was it like a get to thing?
It was definitely a have to thing. But simultaneously, it was very much emphasized in our household. I was really lucky. I mean, my parents put a premium on it. It was very important. I was really lucky because I had an older sister. She's 5 years older. Her name's Jen. Jen was incredibly good and gifted, incredibly intelligent, and like I said, really good at school. So I had someone in the house that I was like looking up to every day, comparing myself to every day. It's kind of funny because when I was in, elementary school, middle school, whenever I'd get a teacher that Jen had, it'd be like, "Oh, you're Jen's little sister." And I'd be like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm going to try to get straight A's like she did, but, we'll see." And then now I got the last laugh because now people, when they meet her, they're like, "Oh, you're Sue's sister?"
Wow.
So it all worked out. No, I'm joking.
You sound like maybe a little bit of a competitive person.
I always got straight A's in competition. That's for sure.
It sounds like having a big sister was a important thing.
Oh yeah, it still is. Still is.
Did you start to know that you were good at stuff? And how could you tell when you were good at a thing? And also, how you eventually started to have to pick which thing you were going to be good at?
Yeah. I was always, like I said, I was always active as a kid. So, the organized part of sports didn't come till probably third, fourth grade. But I do remember, I actually remember this, even though my parents have told the story so much, sometimes that line can be blurred a little bit. I remember my very first soccer game. And I remember we're probably talking, like I said, third grade. And I remember being so scared that I was going to pick the ball up. I have no idea why. It's totally irrational. I was freaking out on the way to the game. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to pick it up. Who knows what the hell I was thinking. And as legend goes, this part I don't really remember, but I kind of remember. As legend goes, I went out there and I scored 6, 7, 8 goals. I was all over the place. Sports always came naturally to me. So I was always, if not the best, right? No matter what sport I was playing, I was always one of the best. I was always one of the most athletic kids in my school, in my grade. Gym class, I was always picked first. Every now and then there'd be a hater, a boy hater, and he wouldn't pick me first, but, I'd have to show him up, of course. It just always came naturally. And then I think as it got more serious, right? So now we're heading into middle school, I start joining travel teams and AAU teams for basketball. And then of course, once you get into high school, it gets even more serious. But I think I really understood particularly in basketball. It happened in soccer as well, but particularly in basketball, I remember we played in a national tournament when I was in 6th grade, and you started getting college letters. They weren't anything, it wasn't like so deep. It was actually very surfacey. All it was, hey, we saw you play, in like a very, formatted letter. We saw you play at this tournament. We would love to stay in touch. Can you please fill out this questionnaire? That allows us to have your information.
Wow.
So yeah, you start getting those types of letters as early as 6th, 7th grade. And that was kind of like, I was like, oh, I remember Duke University was the first one I got. And I was like, oh, I must be all right at this. And kind of just went from there.
I mean, so to back up a little bit, do you feel like that was just something that was like natural and came natural and was just, or was there an amount of like the conditions you were in with some competitiveness with your sister or the relationships you had with your parents, where there was like an amount of this that was natural and amount that was like forged a little bit?
Yeah. I would say most of it was natural. I think I was naturally athletic. Like I said, always active as a kid. Like my mom could never find me. I was either like in a tree or at the park. Like I was classic tomboy. Like I was always active, always athletic. When I got into sports, I was, like I said, always one of the better kids. But I think my sister's actually not competitive with me.
Yeah.
So I always like wanted her to be, but I think she's just like too old for it. She's like, you're annoying, go away. But I think what my family did and then what teammates did and what coaches did, like as I went, was, of course there were things about me, like my personality, like I'm naturally a little more shy or reserved. And it takes me, I'm basically like a dip my toe in the water type of a person. Like I just need to like check things out before I go all in. That's how I am as a person. And that was showing up as an athlete too. And I remember I'd had different coaches early on, we're talking middle school, pull me to the side and be like, hey, like you can't be shy and reserved. Like you have to be a little more aggressive. You have to be, a little more fearless. And that's actually something that continued to play out because it's really who I am. It played out all the way into my professional career. So it's like I was born a certain way with certain abilities, but then of course I was also born a certain way with a certain personality. And it was really kind of figuring that out and how those could come together as an athlete that, other people around me helped. Coaches sometimes do have to, I don't know if the term I would use is beat you down per se, but they do have to put you in almost impossible situations, and you have to I feel like that's where you find confidence, right? Being put in really difficult situations. And it doesn't mean you succeed. It means you're probably going to fail, and you're probably going to have to, show back up the next day and try to figure it out again. And the second you figure it out, to me, that's where confidence comes from. Like having done it on your own.
Absolutely. I resonate with that a lot. So you were talking about 6th grade when you got your first letter. That's wild. I did not, and that was back in whatever, we're about the same age. So that would have been the 90s. And I'm sure things are different now. And so then you had to go to high school. So did you get to sort of pick a little bit where you were going to go to high school? Because were you in New York then?
I'm from Syosset, New York. I went to Syosset schools pretty much my entire life. So when I first went to high school, I went to Syosset High School, and I was there for 9th and 10th grade. And then for a variety of reasons, my parents split up. Basketball was becoming more of my priority. I had to choose after my sophomore year, basketball or soccer. And that was becoming more of my priority. I played on an AAU team that was affiliated with Christ the King High School, which is ultimately where I ended up going for my junior and senior year. So like I said, a lot of variables led to me transferring. So then I finished my high school career, I guess, at Christ the King High School.
Do you think about that mostly as like a sports thing, or do you ever think about the part of high school that was actually school?
That was a sports thing for sure. Truth be told, when I went to you have like an interview type meeting with the principal as a transferring student, and I remember I went there with my dad, and we were kind of talking about the academic part of things, and they looked at my transcript, and like I went from I've always been a good student. Okay. I feel like the way I would describe myself as a student is with like half effort, somewhere between like 50 to 75% effort, I was going to get B's. Right. And if I went from 75 to 85, I was going to get, or maybe even 90, I was going to get B pluses. And then if I really, really applied myself, I was going to get A's. And it just kind of fluctuated between that. So I would go from, it's probably more so like 75 to 100%. I kind of would, like a normal kid. Sometimes it interested me, sometimes it didn't. When my parents, were like, let's go pick this thing up, I would get the A's, and then it fluctuated. So in Syosset, at Syosset High School, I was in, I think like one honors class. In terms of the main subjects, I would think one of my classes was an honors class. Everything else was regular classes. When I went to Christ the King, I immediately was put in all honors. So that was kind of like the level. Syosset, and actually I would say it's not even that Christ the King is a quote unquote bad school. It's that Syosset it's like, I want to say it's like a blue ribbon or something like that. So it was like a tippy top school. A lot of incredibly smart kids. So it definitely was a sports decision. But I felt like, and I know my parents did too, I had a really good foundation of education. And I think what you definitely learn as you go is a lot of times education is what you make it, right? Like, yes, you have to have teachers that are committed and that are, willing, I think, to take the time to teach kids and find ways to communicate, for sure. But it's also what you make it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't, it doesn't happen passively.
Yeah. If I were to give a parallel to sports, right? Like, what was I just saying? I was really lucky to have certain coaches along the way, like, pull things out of me. I think it's similar in education too. You hope that you come across teachers that see something in you or get you.
So as you are, you've got probably a pretty weird, unusual transition from high school to college. You probably have a lot of places that you're picking between. Is that right?
Yeah, yes and no. So at the end of the day, I was really choosing between three schools.
But you were choosing between three schools that would all have you.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I whittled the list down.
UConn, there's a lot of reasons to go to UConn. What went into that choice?
Yeah, again, this was a sports decision. So I think for me, it was trying to find the place that was going to fit from a basketball standpoint, a place where I felt like I was going to be challenged, a place where I could grow. And of course, academics plays a role in all of that. And my parents were really big on the academics. In fact, so much so that they were never, they let me make the decision, which I'm so thankful for. They understood that I was the one that had to go. Like, I was the one that was gonna have to be there for 4 years, not them. So I was really lucky in that sense. But they obviously voiced their opinions, and both of them. So my final three schools, and you'll very quickly see the differences, were UConn, obviously, Stanford, and Vanderbilt. Yeah, so my parents were very much like, Stanford, a degree from Stanford, a degree from Vanderbilt are much different in the world than a degree from UConn. My dad's other point, my mom's as well, was, and UConn at the time, it's still a state school, but at the time, I want to say it was even like borderline a commuter school. So you really had a lot of local kids. And I remember my dad being like, do you want everybody you meet to be from Connecticut? Your friends will be from Connecticut. Who you marry will probably be from Connecticut. And I was like, dang, Dad, what's wrong with Connecticut? But I understood his point. So I went through all the exercises. And at the end of the day, as it turned out, Connecticut was just the place that felt right for me. The school itself, the program, the coaching staff, I have no other way to explain it than that's what my heart was telling me. And so I followed my heart on that one. But obviously Stanford and Vanderbilt were, they were tough to say no to for a lot of reasons.
Can you imagine your life being way different if you had made that choice differently?
I can.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, it's not to say, positively or negatively, but it's hard to argue that the way things turned out, that I didn't make the right choice.
That's a nice thing to be able to say. If only we can all say that at the end of our decisions that we make going into college. So you then go to school. You choose a major. How did you choose a major?
Um, God, taking me back. I think there was like two primary reasons that went into me choosing communications. One was I had like an understanding that I was interested in broadcasting, right? Like it wasn't, I say understanding that I had an interest because I didn't walk into, class my freshman year being like, I want to be a broadcaster. How do I make this happen? I wish, like when people tell me that they knew exactly what they wanted to do from day one, I'm like, I'm so jealous. Like that must feel so nice. I didn't feel like that, but I was drawn to it. Something was like pulling me towards that. So I thought, okay, if broadcasting, especially in sports, is something that, down the line I end up doing, then this is the type of major that can maybe set me up or I can learn some things. And then to be honest, the second variable was that two of my other classmates were taking it. So we were just like in all the same classes and that was really enjoyable.
I love that first thing though. That really resonates where you sort of like are setting yourself up for alternative futures. So it's like, okay, well, there's basketball, which is a thing that is like, who knows? Who like at this point does the WNBA like even exist when you're a freshman? And
yeah, it's the WNBA is like 3 years in. When I went into college, it was really an interesting time for women's basketball. I think I'm one of the first, like my class. So I graduated in 1998 from high school, and the WNBA started in 97. So I'm one of the first classes that was choosing a college knowing that we had a professional league to play in.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so it wasn't, so if I take you back to my college decision, it's not like it was number one on the list the way it might be. I'm sure there are kids today that walk into recruiting meetings and they're like, I want to play in the WNBA. Can you get me there? Or how are you going to get me there? So I wasn't saying that, but I definitely was aware of, okay, Stanford has this many WNBA players. Vanderbilt has this many. UConn, obviously Rebecca Lobo went there, and there were some players who were finishing up their senior year as I was finishing up my senior year of high school, and that's when you get recruited. Nikisha Sales was one of them, and I was like, oh, like I know she's gonna naturally go into the WNBA, so UConn clearly is setting people up for that. So it was like in the back of my head. And so when I got to college, it was a career. It was a career path. To think that I could get drafted 4 years later was, again, not maybe the North Star of it all, the way it probably is now. I mean, I listen to college kids in women's basketball talk now, and it's definitely the North Star. It's like something they're like trying to achieve. So it wasn't quite a North Star, but it was there. I knew if I played well and I took care of things basketball wise, like I knew I was going to have the opportunity to get drafted. So it was I was kind of like one of the first generations to experience in that way. But to your point, at the same time, I was still, academics and my major and what I was thinking about doing was still also very much in the back of my head. I also knew I could probably rely on basketball too. So it was like both were happening at the same time.
That's the best situation where you have multiple good options. How is the balance of, I mean, obviously I assume that basketball was taking up the majority of your time in college. How did you balance that with academic stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost, we were really lucky. We had a lot of resources. One of the first meetings that you go to when you step on campus is with an academic advisor, somebody who's going to kind of explain the ins and outs. You're going to meet with that person, once a week. They help you pick your classes. They help you understand, like, okay, depending on what path you want to go to, it's okay if you don't know that path yet, but just, you want to maybe take some electives here and try that out. And they try to, make it so you're able to expose yourself to a bunch of different things as you go on. And then we had study hall. Freshmen at the University of Connecticut had study hall. So, God, I can't remember if that was once a week, twice a week. I think it was twice a week, maybe once. But we had mandatory study hall. And that was, where there was 5 of us when I came into school. So when I say classmates, I'm referring to the 5 of us. and we had a study hall monitor, and we would just stay in our locker room had like a lounge area, and we would just stay in there and we'd get our work done. If we needed help, we had the monitor who could help us out. And so that right out the gate helps you understand what balance is, because it's built in time. It's mandatory built in time where you are focused on your academics. And then once you become, honestly, halfway through your freshman year, you kind of get the idea, but you still have to go to study hall. And then once you figure out, kind of what's going to work for you, right? Like there's the basketball aspect for sure, the academic aspect. There's also the social aspect. So once you kind of understand how that's going to all work, you're good to go. But I remember, my freshman year, I actually tore my ACL. It was December. So we were just finishing up our first semester. It was like a week before finals. And I ended up, I don't know exactly what my GPA was. I was on pace to be like somewhere in the like 3.0, 3.1 range. But I tore my ACL. I was devastated by that. I didn't really give a lot of time to studying. And you know how, the one thing you learn in college the minute you get there is how grades are weighted. And obviously most of the finals are worth like 50% of your grade. And I did terrible on them because I didn't study. And they ended up falling to like a 2.9 or a 2.8, which I wanted to get a 3.0. That's like that's like a B, right? So it's like, that was me. I always wanted to stay above the threes, which luckily I did the rest of my time at Connecticut. But that was really the first time that basketball got in the way of my academics. And it was really more because it was like an emotional expense when I got hurt. At that time, like I said, it was 1998. You didn't know what was going to happen after tearing your ACL. It was really like a death sentence back then. So that was really, I'm almost thankful it happened. It was a lesson. So many lessons that I learned in that moment of time. It sucked that I didn't get a 3.0, but I learned a lot. And like I said, I never fell below that benchmark again.
Can you talk a little bit about what a communications major was for you and what you did in that?
Yeah, honestly, there was a lot of different like threads to it, I guess. There were some classes that were kind of like maybe what you would think would be communications. I remember early on it was a lot of speech writing and like how to do that. It was a lot of public speaking and how to do that, like how to be best at that, like best practices. Then it got into some other areas. I remember there was like one class that had a lot to do with math. I don't remember what the class was, but I was like, oh, get me out of here. But a lot of the aspects of public speaking, those were the ones that I probably took with me the most. Because you had this shy kid, which, I still have some of that in me. More, again, now it's probably, I would say like reserved, or maybe I'm like introverted, extroverted. I have like a little bit of both. So it just depends. But I'm now like 18 years old in these classes having to give speeches, having to, stand in front of the class and do this. And that went on for the next couple of years. So those are probably the ones I remember the most. And then we did a couple of like studies just around like human behavior in terms of communicating and putting, having two college kids walk in a room and they don't realize they're being filmed and we kind of just watch them interact, like that kind of thing. So it's just like, and everything in between, to be honest.
That sounds great. It sounds like building a lot of real skills that are going to be useful forever.
Yeah, actually, I just remembered. Then you had like individual, like meaning like one-on-one communication and kind of like that, how to navigate that versus in groups.
Yeah, and I think that everybody should take a class on conflict resolution because it's something that we all are going to have to deal with many times in our lives, and it's not great. So it's good to have some tools in the toolkit. Could you imagine a future where you didn't end up going to college at all?
No.
That was not in the space for you. Yeah. That makes sense.
My parents probably wouldn't have allowed for it. I would have been privileged enough to go without a college scholarship. The scholarship helped because I got to rub that in my parents' nose. They're like, well, you didn't pay for college. I want some shoes. You didn't pay for college. But I also, where I went to high school, like I said, growing up in Syosset, pretty much all my friends, I can't think of a friend from childhood that didn't go to college. So that was just always the path. I don't even think I ever thought there was another path.
So obviously basketball was a big part of, you got recruited to schools. How does basketball help pay for college?
Yeah, so generally speaking, in the sport of basketball, it's full scholarships. So they get X amount of full scholarships to fulfill their roster. And yeah, so when they offer you a scholarship, it's a full ride, room, board, the whole thing.
UConn women's basketball was a big deal when you were there. And you were a part of a pretty intense and successful program.
Yeah, when I went there, a big part of the draw was they sold out every single game. So our arena on campus held a little over 10,000. We also had an arena that we played in downtown Hartford that held 16 plus thousand. We sold those out no matter what. Biggest game of the year, first game of the year, a preseason game, it didn't matter. Sold out. Which, you go to college to learn. That's a life lesson right there. Playing in front of sold out arenas, having pressure on you, understanding, what it takes to be a top athlete, to play to your potential every single game. And, while the world is watching, I learned so much from that experience. And it was a big deal. We were big deals on campus, for sure.
That sounds like a huge amount of pressure, and also it makes sense why when you were injured, that wasn't like, oh, now I have more time for academics. It was like, oh, my whole life might be falling apart.
The hard part about the injury was I was worried that my career never even got to start. That was really how I remember feeling. Like I only played in 8 games. I was like, I didn't even get to do it yet, but very quickly, something that I've learned from sports that plays out in school, that I also learned from school that plays out in sports, is preparation, right? If I go back to that story about not studying because I was so devastated, that's the same as not practicing and then showing up for a game and expecting to do well. Like why did I expect to like figure it out in my finals without doing the prep? And that's actually something that Coach Auriemma, my college coach, talked about a lot. It's probably one of the life lessons I took with me more than any, which was he always instilled in us preparation. And he always said, how do you want to feel? He's like, think about when you take a test and you're taking a final exam. How do you want to feel when you walk in that room, right? You want to feel confident. And the way to do that is to study, because we all know what we feel like when we've studied. We walk in the room and we're like, bring it. And we all know what we feel like when we've crammed. We walk in the room like, oh crap. Like, I hope they don't ask this. And it's just not the same feeling. And I think that resonates. It resonated, I know, for me. And so I always, from that point on, wanted to feel that way in the classroom, but I also want to feel that way in the court. I want to step on the court like, whatever you got, doesn't matter, I'm ready for it, versus the opposite.
I've seen you on the court, and the way that you, like, there are times when it's time to talk through what's going on and what to do next. And it, obviously you've had have had a long career. Where does that transition, how does that transition happen from being coached to, in a lot of ways, it seems like you're mentoring other players, you're providing that, and you are, it seems to me like a very central part of that is communicating on the court and off.
Yes. It was definitely a journey, right? Like the stories I could tell you and the ways that I approach things in my final couple years in the WNBA versus, early in my career, totally different. So it was definitely like a journey and a process. But one of the bigger moments for me in college was Coach Auriemma sitting me down and kind of pointing out that, I needed to be more vocal. I needed to take more ownership of the team as a whole. And the way he kind of explained it, or really like hammered it home, was to essentially tell me that everything was my fault. Like that was his way of getting me to see that I needed to take more ownership. So he was like, when so-and-so does something wrong, even if it wasn't you, it's your fault, right? And if so-and-so over there does something wrong, even if it wasn't you, that's also your fault. And at first I was like, well, this makes no sense. Isn't it your fault? You're the coach. What is this? But obviously, I definitely took on what he said. And now I definitely, with confidence can say, all he was trying to do was get me to take ownership. He saw in me someone who I think naturally just got along with everybody. And so that combined with being able to communicate, like I said, literally 5 minutes ago, like with individuals, like meeting them in a moment, like just one-on-one, or having to explain something to a larger group. I think he saw something in me, and that was his way of making sure I took ownership of that. And that 100% played out in my career. I think over time, what happens is you then add experience to that, right? And experience is the best teacher. And I think once you have it, I always felt like once I had it and I had like a good sense of like who I was as a player and how I could be impactful, but also the game itself and using my experience within the game itself, why wouldn't I want to share that with my teammates? Why would I want to help our team be better by helping them be better, which then helps the group be better. So it really started off with just making sure everybody was in the right place, making sure everybody understood what we were doing and why we were doing. A lot of times, a coach could put a play in, but do the players really understand why? Why they're, moving 2 inches to the left to then go right? Like just these small nuances. And I always felt like I could explain those really well, succinctly, but also in a way that was easily digestible. And then as I got older, I was also able to meet people, how do I want to say this? In like emotional places. Like sometimes things aren't going your way. And those are really hard moments. and I think you have to have a care when you talk to people who are, not playing their best. So I added that to my toolkit.
How do you take that kind of pressure that's being put on you and turn it to productive end? Because I think obviously you can.
I think a big part of, if we talk about that particular moment, a big part of that was that I trusted Coach Auriemma. I trusted him. He in many ways is, he's our coach. He also is a little bit of a father figure, right? I'm 18, 19 years old at this point. I trust this person. He's had so much success. He's helped other players. So I really trusted him. So even if I had a little voice initially that was like, is this guy serious? This is my fault. I trusted him. And I knew that all he wanted was for me to be the best version of myself, right? I knew he wanted me to be great. And so, combined with the trust, I wanted to be great. And this did feel, it actually, once I got past the old man is crazy vibes, I was like, this actually makes sense. Like I see how I can be impactful in this way. It really spoke to me. It was natural for me. Now, if it wasn't natural, then I probably would have rebelled or something. I definitely would have been a little more, reluctant. Yeah. I would have been more reluctant, but it came naturally. I started to see how it was going to play out. I started to buy into it. I started to see the impact of it. And then you just kind of continue down that path.
I think that's so, that trust element is so important. And there's lots of different ways to earn that. Did you ever feel like you had made the wrong major choice, or were you coast, I like this is good?
Interesting question. I think so I retired in 2022. I would say probably my last couple years and then into now. So let's call it the last 5-6 years. Now that I'm more on the business side of things, I've had little moments where I'm like, should I have majored in business? Would that have been? But you know what? I'm getting, the life experience part of business. So I'm having to learn on the fly. The big joke is I didn't know what PTO stood for. I mean, I don't know if they teach you that in business classes anyway, but it does kind of represent my lack of knowledge around some things. So I have had moments where I've thought oh, should I have majored in business? And then the truth is I don't think it really would have mattered.
So for me, when I graduated from college, it was very exciting. I felt like I did the thing, but I also was terrified of the part where I was going to have to get a job. You were pretty set that you were going to get drafted as a number 1 draft pick. You probably were at least going to get drafted. So you probably had that transition kind of set out ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, like I said, a lot of my close friends growing up who weren't athletes, I was kind of seeing what they were going through, whether it was summer internships during college or even internships right after college, and trying to figure out what career path, what lane, what interests them, and trying to get it all. And like, there's obviously competition within that. And you're not always going to get the job you want. And there's the money part of it, and where you're going to live, and all the things. And I was like, yeah, I got drafted, and they picked me up and they took me to my apartment, and I had a car waiting, and, I had a 401k ready to go.
Well, at that point, the WNBA, I mean, and even now, isn't necessarily a super high-paying job. Was there any struggle there, or were there other income streams?
No, I know. So it's interesting, right? So there's two sides to this coin for sure. When I first got drafted, I want to say my salary was like $65,000. So the first pick got a 2-year deal right out the gate at $65,000. And when you think about it, the WNBA, so this is one side of the coin. The WNBA is only like 4 or 5 months long. So I have a late birthday. I'm born in October. So I was 21 years old. I got drafted in, whatever it was, April. I'm 21 years old, and I'm making $65,000 for 4 to 5 months of work. And then I get the rest of that off season to do other things, right? Whether it's marketing deals, brand endorsements. I actually ended up playing in like a semi-pro league that paid somewhere in like the 50, 60K range. So now you're like, okay, so now I'm 22 years old after my first WNBA season. And now I'm probably making, who knows? I don't know, 200K for, not that much.
Yeah, never mind. You're doing great.
Yeah. So, I mean, like the other side of the coin is, no, yeah, the WNBA wasn't invested in the ways it should have been, and so on and so forth. We know that. But after my 3rd year in the WNBA, I started going overseas. And that's where I made, big bank. So now I'm 25 years old, and I'm setting myself up for really generational wealth in a lot of ways, because we're making, hundreds of thousands of dollars over there.
You end up in Seattle. You get drafted in Seattle. You head over there, and I can imagine that, like, for most of your life, you're 21 years old. You've had this a lot of structure, and now maybe for the first time you kind of don't. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Interestingly, so that's definitely accurate. I went from a ton of structure, right, in college, really busy schedule, to only basketball. Now I have one priority. Basketball is now my job, is the only thing I care about, is the only thing, I'm focused on, especially when you're in season. But now I have to, there's nobody telling me what time pregame meal is. There's nobody telling me what time, well, I guess we'll use study hall again, what time study hall is, or what time the meet. Yeah. It's like, I remember my very first trip. I think it was like a preseason game. It was the first time we were traveling when I was on the Storm, and we landed wherever we were. We landed, and the game wasn't until the next night at 7 p.m. It's very customary for basketball. You have what's called a shoot around the day of the game, usually at like 10 or 11 a.m. You just go and you get some shots up, you talk strategy. But we landed the day before, who knows, 3 o'clock. We get to the hotel, and I'm thinking like, okay, what time's dinner? What time are we all doing this? What time are we all doing that? And they were like, okay, so the bus tomorrow is at 10 a.m. See you later. And I was like, what do I do now? This is on me. But like everyone, when you get to that point, you figure it out. And sometimes it's trial and error till you get to the end result. End result. Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you figure it out right away, and you just go from there. It's like all a part of life. But yeah, at first I had a ton of free time. I mean, practices all in are only a couple hours a day. Maybe 3 if you add like the stuff you do before practice, the treatment you do after, maybe 4 at the most. Some people it's more, don't get me wrong. Not for me. For me, it's like 3-4 hours max I'm in that place. So I'm out of there by like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and then it's like, well, then what? and you got to figure all that out. And I'm in a new city. I don't have any friends outside of my teammates. So I'm kind of exploring that aspect. I remember sometimes I used to drive around and this is like pre-smartphone, obviously pre-GPS. I used to just like drive around and get lost to try to find my way back. So I was like, well, at least I'm going to learn the city at the very least. Yeah. So I was just trying stuff.
You then stay in Seattle for 20 years, which is like a huge amount of time for anyone to spend in one job these days, let alone a professional athlete. Why? I imagine you had opportunities to go to different places and also opportunities to just like be done. But you kept at it for sort of a legendarily long amount of time.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, like this was my career, and this is not about how you just said it, but it was interesting because I feel like once I hit 30, I started getting the question about when are you going to retire? What are you going to do after? And I always found it so interesting because it's not something you would ever ask another profession. You would never ask a doctor, like, well, how long are you going to doctor? Like, how long are you going to do these things?
Eventually, you start asking the question.
Yeah, maybe you should.
Sure?
Yeah,
you're good.
And don't get me wrong, I totally understand. It's because athletes, without a doubt, have an expiration date. I totally get that. But 30 felt so early. I was like, why are you asking me this now?
Well, and it's not like your game was suffering. You
were playing
great. Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, I always looked at it like this is my job, it's my career. I get paid to do this. I'm able to live the life I want to live because of it. So why, and I enjoy it, sidebar, I like it. So it's like, why wouldn't I do this as long as possible? And then when it comes to Seattle specifically, for the first, I would say easily like 8, 9, 10 seasons, I had no desire to leave. There was no reason. Lauren Jackson, who's one of the best players of all time, was also on our team. She's a post player, I'm a guard. It's very Stockton and Malone, if you will. So it was a perfect team for me. We had won 2 championships in that time. The franchise itself, we were owned by the Sonics. We were in the same ownership group as the Sonics. When they left, a group of women stepped up and bought us and kept us in Seattle.
Wow.
And so the support from them was unbelievable. My connection to the city, the community, I made friends, I had a home. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to stay.
Yeah.
There was really only one moment in time, if you fast forward 5 years from that time frame that I'm talking about, the team started to go through naturally, Lauren retired. Naturally we go through a rebuild and there was a moment of, okay, do I want to be here for a rebuild or do I want to spend the last couple of years that I have maybe in New York where I'm from and try to win a championship there with a team that had a lot of vets and was on its way. Ultimately, as we know, I decided to stay. It was worth it more to me to continue to build the legacy that I already started in Seattle and to stay there and to help the younger players that were coming in now and kind of, share the knowledge and let them, take the lead and usher in a new generation of Storm basketball. It turned out it was the best decision I made. We ended up winning 2 more times, which was, I couldn't have imagined that. And I was able to finish my career on my terms. So there's just so many wonderful things that came from staying there. And it really, like I said, there was the one time I kind of thought about it.
I think I've heard you say that you judge success by winning, which makes sense in sports. But I'm so curious how now that you are not in sports, how has that transition been? Like, do you feel like you can still feel like you're winning even when there isn't points on the board?
Yeah, I do. Obviously it changes. To your point, it's not the same as sports exactly. When I think of the businesses that I'm involved in, I think there's always, benchmarks you're trying to hit along the way. You're always setting goals and trying to get there. I think there's similar to sports. So I understand that what's missing is like the one championship that you either get or you don't. I definitely understand that. But I think in every career, in every industry, there's always the small wins along the way that are really, to be honest, probably even more important to some degree. So I'm seeing that now in a lot of the business stuff that I'm doing. Like there's these small wins. And if I'm being, I mean, this is like a big statement in a lot of ways, but it's true. I think because of my experience as a professional, woman who played basketball, who's an athlete in this country, I'm able to now use that experience. I'm able to leverage it. I'm able to use my platform, my voice to actually bring change in our world. And it's like a big statement because it's like, oh, you're changing the world, which is sometimes hard to understand. But I mean, you look at the NCAA tournament this year for women's college basketball and you're like, wow. And I know that all of us, right? Every single one of us that has played basketball along the way, like we played a role in that. So I know I played a role in that. And so that's like a major win. It's a huge win, And so I'm just finding that on the other side, even though I'm not a player, I can still have impact and I can still help create change on this other side in the world of women's sports. And sports mirrors society. So in a lot of ways, whatever happens on the sports side of things for women is probably going to happen just in, larger society for women. A good example of that is actually the CBA that the WNBA did a couple of years ago where we got 100% maternity leave. I can't tell you how many women have come up to me and been like, we didn't have 100% maternity leave at our company, but when we saw you guys do it, like we used that as motivation and we put our foot down and we're able to get it. And I mean, we're literally changing the world. It's crazy.
So how did Togethxr come together?
So the way it came together, so there's 4 of us, and the way it came together was Alex Morgan really had the idea. And if you rewind a couple of years, you were seeing, Derek Jeter started the Players Tribune. You were seeing, LeBron started Uninterrupted. So you're seeing these athletes, right, create their own platforms, create their own production companies, and that was their way of making sure their stories were told in the right way. But it was really all, I mean, they every now and then those platforms covered women for sure, but it was just like a percentage of the coverage. And then as I mentioned earlier, the stat I mentioned earlier, at that time, women's athletes were only receiving 4% of all media coverage. And so Alex was like, wait a minute, LeBron has his own, Derek Jeter started over here, Steph Curry has one, we're only getting 4%. Like, how can we change that? And so that's where she called me, Simone, and Chloe, and was like, this is the idea I have. If we do this together, obviously it ends up being called together, but if we do this together, we could make a splash, we could make a dent, we could do some things, and we could really tell the stories of the women in the sports space. It's gone beyond that, it's in culture as well. But we could tell the stories that aren't given enough time. They're not given enough spotlight, they're not told the right way, they're not given enough time. So immediately I was like, well, where do I sign up? This is amazing.
Yeah.
So the 4 of us came together, but we also have, obviously we had to get the money. So, we have investors, we have people who have been in the space before. Someone else who also helped found the company, Jess Robertson, she actually came from the Players Tribune, so she had that background. She essentially runs the show now. And then you start to bring in the people who have the expertise, right? Like, listen, I play basketball, I'm a point guard. That's my expertise. So if you're starting a basketball team, like, yeah, you call me first. I'm starting a business, I'm gonna call the experts. Like, that's who you're gonna bring in. So that's what we were able to do and form a team who are really the ones, running the brand. We're a part of the brand because they're obviously leveraging our own individual platforms and leveraging who we are in this world. And of course we have our input. We have, meetings every now and then where we get to like talk about things and see the financials and all the things. So of course they're treading off of us, or drafting us off of us, I should say. But there are of course people that are experts in this space that are the ones running the day to day. And that's how Togethxr has been rolling since.
So that there are now, of course, lots of extremely talented young basketball players coming up. How do you think about helping them with the expertise that you have developed?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I meet a younger athlete or come in contact with, I always make sure they know that my door is always open, right? The first piece of advice I usually give, a lot of us give this, is like, find a veteran player that you vibe with and just drill them with questions. Because we are like, women's basketball is a small community in a lot of ways. right? We're big in the sense that it's athletes and it's sports, so a ton of people are playing it. But when you get to the WNBA, it's only 12 teams, 12 roster spots, 144 players. Like it's a pretty small community, and we're competitive on the floor, and we want to obviously beat each other, but simultaneously, we're all in this together. So it's always like find a vet. So I always try to make myself available. I think something I'm really proud of is that with a company like Togethxr and then some of the other businesses I'm involved in, I know I'm creating opportunities for these players. I know that these companies are helping tell their stories or helping, give them a place where they can be seen. I love it when WNBA players are covered by Togethxr or when they interact. It's really something, because you always talk about wanting to help others or wanting to create change, opportunity, everything, and all of the above, I should say, but to actually do it and actually see it in real time is really special for me.
You've got a lot going on. You have no shortage of stuff to do, but what's next for Sue Bird?
So the way the kind of categories go, I'm a founder of Togethxr, which is a media commerce company. Megan, my fiance, and I have a production company at Touch More. Togethxr and A Touch More they share resources. They're two different companies, but they're pretty much sisters, which works great. That'll hopefully tell more long form stories, docs, scripted, unscripted, you name it. Then there's some like in front of the camera stuff that I've been doing, right? I hosted Sue's Places, which was in the family of Peyton's Places shows where, for my series, I went around and told stories about the world of college basketball, which is great. Diana Taurasi and I host a show during the Final Four called the BTS show, Bird and Taurasi show, like a mega cast. Hopefully we do more of that. And then I just got involved in another business called Deep Blue. It's a media buying agency. So really bringing my industry knowledge into this space, because obviously women's sports is hot and there's more brands getting involved. So being able to just share my experience and share my understanding. So last but not least, I've gotten into team investment and ownership. I'm an investor in Gotham FC, which is the team here in New York in the NWSL. Yeah. And just recently, I became part of the Storm ownership group.
Wow.
So building my portfolio, as they say.
When did you feel like you obviously are an athlete who has been at the top of their game. Like, when did you feel like you were there? Like, was there a moment?
Like the top of my game?
No, like when you felt like you'd kind of made it. Like, I did it.
I think there's been like levels to it. I think I could probably go back and pick like 3 or 4 moments of making it. I could do it pretty quick. In college, Coach Ariema was the assistant coach for the Olympic team for the 2000 Olympics. I had just finished my sophomore year, and he came back from that experience and he looked me dead in the eye, like serious. And he was like, I just spent like the last month with the best players. He's like, if you want to be on that team, you can do it. He's like, you got to start taking it more serious, but you can do it. And I remember being like, oh, like for him to say that, I was like, oh. So it wasn't that I made it. Obviously, I hadn't done anything yet. But I was like, oh, this is a moment. And I think when I think of the moments from that point on, getting drafted number 1, I knew I made it. Winning championships, winning my first championship in the WNBA. That actually happened in the exact same year that I made my first Olympic team. So I think making my first Olympic team, that was always my goal. Because even though the WNBA showed up late in high school, the Olympics was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an Olympian. So that was a version of making it. And now if we, fast forward, we zoom ahead, I look back and winning multiple championships with multiple teams in multiple decades. I mean, of course I made it, right?
I think you made it.
Yeah, we're good.
Thanks for watching this episode of College Journeys. We're all a little bit lost, but we can learn from each other. If you're working on your own college journey, whether that's just thinking about starting college, or you're in the middle of it, or you're thinking about going back, Study Hall has resources to help you. From our fast guides to help you understand different college majors, to actually signing up for college-level courses through GoStudyHall.com, we can help you on your path.